Today I'm going to be taking a look at The Big Bang Theory Season 2, Episode 9, The White Asparagus Triangulation. This episode gets this title because later in the episode, Sheldon tries to get Leonard to open a jar of white asparagus to prove his manliness. That is because Sheldon likes the girl that Leonard is trying to date in this episode and views her as a suitable relationship for Leonard, one that he's okay with, so he's doing all that he can to try to make sure that their relationship moves forward. That is Sheldon's focus throughout this entire episode. And the episode starts off with him trying to make small talk with Penny at the mailbox. And the reason he's doing this is because he wants to speak to Penny. He tries to start a conversation so that he can then start a more awkward conversation. He reviews that Leonard's in a new relationship with Stephanie and says that what she may not realize is that this relationship is also very important to Sheldon because of all the women that Leonard has tried to date, she's the only one that he finds tolerable, and that includes Penny. And he tells her that if she were to interact with Stephanie, he doesn't want Stephanie to view her as a sexual rival. Penny says that shouldn't be a problem, but Sheldon's still worried. He gives a very specific scenario and asks Penny to keep herself at bay. She says she'll think of him to help with that, and he says anything that works, and then they go their own separate ways. We next see Leonard and Stephanie on what is supposed to be a date, but they are joined by Sheldon, who is trying to keep the conversation going, and when Leonard asks him why he decided to stay on their date, he said that he was trying to make sure that it went well. He then explains to Leonard why their relationship working out is important to him, and it's a very interesting explanation, actually. He explains that Stephanie joining their group would round out their Star Trek landing party. He says that Leonard is Captain Kirk, Sheldon himself is Spock, Howard is Scotty, and Raj is the red-shirted crewman always getting killed in each episode. And with the addition of Stephanie, they now have a McCoy. Interesting that he just decided to make Raj the character who gets killed in every episode instead of making him a Uhura, which might have been funnier. Or maybe even Chekhov. Other placements are very interesting. He makes Leonard Captain Kirk, which makes sense because although he's making him the captain, he would want to be Spock because he views Spock as the more intelligent character and a character that he more personally relates to, because Sheldon does not feel like he fits in with regular society, much how Spock didn't fit in with humans. Howard makes perfect sense because he's an engineer, so it makes sense that he would be Scotty. Raj is the only one that throws off a little bit, but it's a little jab at Raj, it's funny. We next see Leonard and Stephanie attempting to have another date alone by going to the movies, but Sheldon has found them. He was a little perturbed at Leonard for leaving a note that they were going to the movies, but not telling him when and where. Almost like they wanted to be alone. Sheldon then begins trying to echolocate the perfect seat in the theater, only to find out that Leonard's already sitting in it. Leonard doesn't want to move, so Sheldon sits next to him and leans very closely over into his seat. You would think Leonard knows better at this point and would just scoot down one seat. Later that night, Sheldon awakens Leonard and he tells him that he's very concerned because on Stephanie's Facebook page, she still lists herself as single and she's giving digital sheep to other men and not Leonard. Leonard attempts to tell Sheldon at this point that his relationship has nothing to do with him, and Sheldon says he cannot allow this and invokes a Star Trek policy, which is General Order 104, Section A, which gives him the right to relieve Leonard of command if he is deemed unfit for duty. And Leonard reminds him that this is not Star Trek, so that is not applicable. Sheldon, however, is not giving up. He sets off trying to find other ways to keep this relationship going. He goes and brings Penny a gift of banana bread so that she'll invite him in to talk, and she does, after his not-so-subtle suggestion. And Sheldon begins trying to interview her to ask her what went wrong and why she didn't continue pursuing a relationship with Leonard so he can see where the mistakes were made. Penny doesn't really want to talk about this, so she makes a joke referencing the movie The Lake House to mock Sheldon a little bit. Sheldon's upset about this because he says it's not bad enough that you made him watch that movie, but now you're mocking him with it. Sheldon next talks to Raj and Howard at the university cafeteria about this to try to see if they have any input that could try to prolong Leonard's relationship, and they basically say that they don't think that the relationship will last very long, and they only have two potential suggestions. Raj's is that they kill every other man on Earth, so Stephanie has no other options, and Howard says not to try to spray the cologne from the commercials that makes the women attack you. So basically it's genocide or watch the cologne. Not much help from these two. Sheldon then returns to Penny with the gift of zucchini bread. We actually get an interesting part here where Sheldon's knocking on his door doing his traditional triple knock. Penny answers on the second knock, but Sheldon still has to complete the knock by knocking on the door frame and saying Penny one more time, even though she's already opened the door. He then asks Penny very abruptly where she is in her menstrual cycle. He gives the explanation that this is because he's done research that says that female primates, which he includes Penny of, are more attracted to a man if they're being pursued by another potential suitor, And this is intensified if they're secreting the hormones that come along with the menstrual cycle. Penny just shuts the door in his face at this point, and who could blame her? That's very weird. So, the next thing we see is Leonard and Stephanie having another date, and Sheldon has come up with yet another plan to try to impress Stephanie on Leonard's behalf. He pretends to be unable to open a jar of white asparagus, that's where we get the title for this episode, and he asks Leonard to open it for him, trying to prove that he's the dominant male in the apartment. He explains to Leonard that if he has a dominant display and then sleeps with Stephanie after, it will produce a chemical reaction in her brain that will make her more attracted to him in the long run. Leonard tries to open the jar, but is ultimately unable, and when trying to bang it on the counter, he breaks the jar and cuts his hand. He gets sick in the kitchen, and then is taken to the hospital where Stephanie stitches up his hand. Stephanie says she's going to discharge him and send him home. She was going to stay the night with him, but says now she thinks he needs to rest. Sheldon notes that it's a shame that she did a good job on the stitching and it won't scar, because that would have been another thing that might have attracted her. And back at the apartment for the closing scene, we have Leonard, Sheldon, Raj, and Howard all having dinner at the apartment. Raj has to see Leonard's stitches, and he shows him. Howard sees it for a moment and gets very sick. And Penny comes in and says, congratulations to Leonard, because it appears that Leonard has changed his Facebook status to in a relationship. And this was actually Sheldon's final plan. He hacked Leonard's Facebook and changed this status. Everybody else seems concerned because it seemed like an odd thing that Leonard would do this so early in their relationship when Stephanie had not already done this as well. Leonard gets very mad at Sheldon and is yelling at him until Raj notices something on the computer screen, and that's that Stephanie has, in reaction, changed her Facebook status to also be in a relationship with Leonard. And Leonard seems pleased and surprised to find out that he now has a girlfriend officially. And Sheldon is very, of course, pleased with himself that his plan did work, and he says, Dr. Sheldon Cooper for the win. And that is The Big Bang Theory, Season 2, Episode 9, The White Asparagus Triangulation. Now, this episode does have a few interesting points, starting with Leonard. This is the first relationship we see Leonard have on the show that's an actual real relationship. We saw him hook up with Leslie Winkle a few times and try to begin a relationship with her, although that did not go anywhere. He's tried to date Penny, of course, but they haven't got their feet off the ground with that yet. So this is his first successful relationship in the show, and the first one to last multiple episodes. The other major focus of this episode is, of course, Sheldon. We see just how intense he is and how he tries to control his environment around him. He finds that this girl that Leonard is dating is acceptable to him, so he is willing to go to extreme lengths to make sure that their relationship continues. And as he said, it helps them round out their Star Trek boarding party. Another fun thing with Sheldon in this episode is we get to see just how awkward he is and how he doesn't quite understand normal social conventions. We see him try several times throughout the episode to use social conventions that he's seen others use, or probably seen on TV and other things, such as when he tried to talk to Penny and bring her gifts to get invitations into her apartment to talk to her. Trying very hard for these things that would come natural to others, but they come off as very awkward and forced in his case. We largely see in this episode that Sheldon will go to any lengths to see his agenda pushed forward. We don't get a lot of involvement in this episode from Raj Howard, a little bit more from Penny, but not that much there either. This episode largely just focuses on Sheldon and this growing relationship between Leonard and Stephanie. But any episodes featuring Sheldon is a good thing. This is a solid episode, and I would score this episode at an 8 out of 10. Let me know your thoughts on this episode in the comments section, and please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and keep an eye out for my next video coming soon.